Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to gather a cadre of writers, thinkers, and teachers who are transforming the world one character at a time. And it all starts with one thing, a deep understanding of human motivation, why people do what they do, and the forces that drive them. To gain that understanding, I am mining the intersection of psychology, theology, and philosophy to make you a better writer. This is episode 96, How to Zettelkasten a Book, The Index, Part 2. This is a continuation of the index entry that I did a couple of nights ago, and I have received requests that people want me to go ahead and explain the symbology on my index cards and to give you some of the subtleties that I only hinted at in the first episode. So without further ado, let's take a look at some examples. These examples are excerpts from a card from the letter L in my Zettelkasten. In my Zettelkasten, there are several cards for the letter L, so I've got L 1, 2, 3, etc. for several of them. And what we're going to find over here in the examples are some of the symbols that I use and how I organize my index a little bit. These are our card numbers. Over on the left, you'll probably remember that from the first episode on the index. And you'll probably recognize that these are the titles of the card that we also talked about. But you could also see a number of symbols that I only hinted at in the past and first lesson and did not go into. So I'm going to go into them now so that you know how I use them and why I use them. Index cards can start getting to be, there can get to be a lot of them. And when there get to be too many of them, I sometimes break them down into subgroups. In particular, the letter S was the first one that had to be broken down into SA and SE, and breaking some of it up so that they weren't so thick, so many different cards. Another way that they start building up is the same word will start occurring over and over again in the index card. When that happens, I promote that word and I put it on a card of its own. And in this example, learning has been used 3 or more times, and it's been promoted to a card of its own. So there will be a separate card, learning paren 1 paren, with all of the instances of the use of that word in my index. I underline the word when that happens, and my underlining signals to me right away that that word is now off on a card on its own. And I reinforce that with this square brackets followed by an arrow. What that tells me is I can see at a glance that this whole line no longer really belongs on this card. It actually belongs over on a card of its own. And there's another symbol on this same line, and that is this purple square bracket. The purple square bracket tells me that this card at this address is a directory, which is to say that it's a header card for a number of cards that follow it that are all on the subject. The Zettelkasten is a learning tool. So what you'll find on that header card is not a whole lot of information, but it serves as a grouping mechanism for the cards behind it. You'll see that same symbol down here on the next example. So again, 3E5 is another directory, and it's a directory of where the subject is techniques for language teaching and learning. Learning, as we noted above, has been promoted, and so again you see the solid line underscore for learning, but what you don't see is the red arrow over here. It's moved up here. And the reason why it's in that place over the word learning and not out in front is that language has only been used a few times. It's not once or one or two times. It hasn't been promoted. And so this line is still a valid entry in the index on account of the word language, which has not been promoted. Okay, then when we go to the next line, there's another example of an L that's just an underscore, which means that word limits has only been used once or twice in my index. Here we have a different symbol that we haven't seen before, the double slash in green. What that tells me is that this is a regular main card and there's information on that card itself, and it's about going to the limits of our powers. Coming down one more, we see a green square bracket. A green square bracket is a hybrid. A green square bracket, it contains data itself, may contain data itself, but it also serves as a header to cards behind it. It's at a lower level of grouping than the purple, and this one is not as important. I will explain that a little bit more when I go through my method of numbering, but it is another form of a directory. And once again, the L has an underline on locus, which means it's only been used once or twice. So that's how I use symbology on my Zettelkasten. Some people, when a word has been promoted, they cross out the entry. But I'm not crazy about crossouts. I think they are unattractive. So I would rather just signal that the entry has been promoted. So I hope that will answer the question for those of you who wanted to know, well, what are those symbols and what do you do that's special? And what I do that's special is pulling out words that are used repeatedly, and these are what the symbols are and what they mean. So tomorrow I'll give you a little bit about numbering, and we're going to talk about theory and philosophy, and because it's far more important than any particulars of numbers, and I'll explain why that's true as well tomorrow. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.